are these people?
So like I said, I've had this on the back burner for a while. I figured there was going to come a point where, like honestly, I'm just kind of pissed off with the left in general because I feel like we get easily distracted. Not all of us, but many of us get easily distracted as far as the drama that kind of ensues online, and we just kind of get caught up in that and then not focus on like the issues that we need to deal with in order, you know, to really make radical change. Like it's more often than not like squirrel moments that we get um that distract us, which takes us away from the discipline that we need to have in order to get shit done.
Yeah.
But in light of that, so I talked about Kwame Ture, basically revolutionary, during the civil rights movement. So this came from the clip that I'm actually going to show later in a minute. So obviously we've been talking, like people are been talking a lot of like we need to be unified and whatever else and blah 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 blah. So he said, unity is not a feeling, unity is not an emotion. Unity is a means of channeling the energies of people towards given objectives within principles. And I thought about that in terms of like certain channels. We're not going to name them. In like, and I had to think about this. It's like, what are their objectives, on their channels? I think for us at INN, like, I think one of our objectives is to give voice to people who often do not have a voice, especially within the working class. So I think we're trying and building towards that, especially with our independent channels, just trying to uplift voices that we never hear from, but often with the larger channels, they don't necessarily do that. They often kind of focus on, issues, but again, even in that is kind of more of a within an academic or theoretical context, but never necessarily within an actionable context where they're kind of saying, like we're organizing a strike or talking about mutual aid, or direct action or stuff like that, unless if it's a situation within an issue that they're forced to do it, but it's not necessarily something that they're able to connect with the working class in order to do it. So yeah, let's watch this clip from Kwame. And as I said, Greg, I'm very curious to see what your thought is on this. So might need
help playing. Help!
Yeah. Unity of action. We lack unity of thought. But our unity of action, it shocks us. In 1965, the African and whites revolted. Revolted. They shocked America, shocked themselves. We did that. I'm a revolutionary. Making and planning mass revolts is my job. I tell you a secret. I've been doing it a long time. When I was in SNCC, we used to use nonviolence as a cover to make rebellions in Houston, Texas, in Atlanta, Georgia, Cambridge, Maryland. We be just like King, we nonviolent, we bop him with a And that's all I do. And if anyone ever came to me and said, we want you to make a rebellion in Los Angeles, I'd really be happy to do that. But I have to honestly tell them that really at this time I can't do it. But these Africans in Los Angeles, they hear something they don't like, which they consider to be an injustice. Without the slightest planning, everybody en masse jumps up and takes on Los Angeles. We have strong unity of action. You have it too, don't get confused.
Unity!
If tonight, after I leave here, the local clan rides up on the campus, puts up some racist signs, slaps a couple of sisters, brothers around, tomorrow morning, every African out here be out here. Even the Uncle Toms, let's get down, we got to do something. And I promise you, for 3 or 4 days, you'll be very hot. There'll be no peace on this campus for 3 or 4 days. White students even be afraid of you. And after 3 or 4 days, you will sit down and you'll forget about it. And the Uncle Tom will say, oh God, please don't let him come back before I graduate. We have unity of action. We lack unity of thought. It's because we lack unity of thought that our unity of action is so spontaneous. We jump up and sit down. We jump up and sit down. We must come to qualify our action. We must come to get unity of thought. This unity of action is powerful, and it comes from mobilization. A young student came to me the other day and said, oh, Brother Kwame Ture, I sure wish I was around the 60s. I said, why? I never want to go back in history. I want to go forward. And what lies before me is far greater and brighter than what lay before me in the 60s. He said, well, you know, in the 60s we were so united. I said, were we? He said, yeah. I told him, no, we were not. He said, we were. I said, no, we were not. Sajifo Kwame Nkrumah says, unity presupposes organization. If you have no organization, you can't be united. Unity is not a feeling. I imagine when the Klan comes up here and you're 3 or 4 days when you're real hot, everybody say, hey, brother, what's happening? Hey, sister, what's happening? Yeah, getting down, brother, sister. You think you got unity. Unity is not a feeling. Unity is not an emotion. Unity is a means of channeling the energies of the people towards given objectives within principles. In the 1960s, we had no organizations. We had mobilization. You must not get confused between mobilization and organization. The confusion can be compounded if one doesn't study properly Dr. King and doesn't know him. Dr. King was one of the greatest mobilizers this century's ever seen, but he never organized. He was not an organizer. And for him, he didn't need organizing. After all, Dr. King was a reformist. When you're a reformist, all you need to do is to put pressure on the people to tell them to do right. That's all Dr. King saw as his job, was to put pressure on the American government to show them that they should live up to the Constitution. That was his task. When you want power, you organize. Because you don't want to put influence, you want to seize power for yourself and do for yourself what you're putting pressure for the others to do for you. Because Dr. King never thought of organization. Of course, when you mobilize, everybody can be against the same thing. When you organize, everybody must be for the same thing. You mustn't think everybody being against the same thing means that everybody is for the same thing. That's where the confusion arises. The nationalist struggle, the struggle for independence in Africa, is indicative here. It's instructive. All Africans wanted the colonial system out. They wanted it destroyed. But some Africans, like Mobutu, wanted the white man out to take his place so they continue exploiting Africans. Some Africans, like Lumumba, wanted to destroy the colonial system so they can set up an equitable system for all Africans. Just because everybody's against the same thing doesn't mean everybody is for the same thing. When the Klan comes here, every African student will be against the Klan. We say even the Uncle Tom. But just because everybody's against the Klan together doesn't mean that everybody's for the same thing. And unity doesn't represent what you're against. It represents what you are for. Consequently, when one speaks of unity, one must speak of organization. No people can be free. No people will ever be free unless they are consciously organized.
I have some thoughts, but I'm curious to hear what you're thinking of, Greg.
If you look at the left today, I mean, compared to like MLK days, and I kind of like discussed this with Bruce a little bit about how it was like much easier before the advent of the internet in order to create any sort of organization. I really think politics is like formed not about any sort of, there are no principles on the left. No one has quote unquote principles. Most media personalities that you see on this side of the aisle, and I can say this about people whose opinions I like actually respect. Mm-hmm. They let ideology consume their identity.
Yeah.
And so it becomes almost a part of them. Like if you're not for this, you're against me. And so it becomes like a personal attack.
Right.
Right. Which
a lot of people, they can't, and this, like I really respect people like Daryl Davis, which he was talking about the Klan, engaging with people who don't necessarily, there's people on Twitter who genuinely think conservatives are these vile like creatures instead of humans. And I really think like a lot of the principles that the left holds, or at least they should be holding, or at least they used to, is a human-centered society
Yeah.
where we're with each other, not against each other. Because there is a common enemy. I think we kind of saw this earlier with that video of like the that guy who was like talking to like a MAGA person and he was like talking about Marx.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's clear that like I think just as a human being, you stand for certain principles like justice and equality, and I think everyone really deep down really wants that, but they're consumed by ideology because it's fun. It's a game to them.
Yeah.
It's literally just like a debate, bro, fucking back and forth. No one has any actual principles here. I mean, I can name maybe a couple, but it's hard to come by. And you know, I want to invoke Daryl Davis again. He's a really great guy.
Yeah,
his books all.
And TED Talk is great. You know, like also a great boogie woogie piano player. You know,
he's a blues musician.
Mm-hmm. So
hella respect that.
Like
hella respect musicians who can organize because
that's how he begun to organize. If you've ever looked at like, you know, like Daryl Davis was playing in like honky tonk bars doing like boogie woogie stuff, right? Like Jerry Lee Lewis and stuff like that. Right. And essentially they were like, I've never seen, you know, a black man tickle ivories like that. You know, you can't be all bad. Like, and that's how he would start like those conversations. You know?
Yeah, white people love that shit. It's fucking.
Mm-hmm. But
it's incredible how like people, and I really find it difficult to see people like leaders like that who come. And I'm of the opinion that I think any movement needs a figurehead or a leader. And I'm not saying that they're like they necessarily have to be like raised like gods, but I don't see any sort of Daryl Davis or MLK or Malcolm X types.
This is where that like hardened cynicism comes in, and me and Lucy have also talked about this, where it's like, I don't think you can have a figurehead. I think one person. I think it's too easily controlled and manipulated. Like,
well, you know what? I wouldn't say I wouldn't necessarily say you shouldn't.
Yeah,
but that person has to be principled as far as how they go about it.
Right.
Like
no, I'm talking about an actual figurehead, not like some guys gonna dupe you. Like
I think a team of figureheads. Like when you listen to Ture, what did Ture say you should be organizing for?
Power.
Right. But like specifically why? Like who was he saying? Well, what did you need to organize? Like, he says it like, I'm trying to remember his exact phrasing. But he's like under ideals, and like whatever. Like that's the thing that should be like to me, organizing on focused issues, where like and things like in Chicago, we've talked about people who are solely organizing under like, you know, judicial reform specifically, so that they are directly like trying to fight the legal system with their community, like that kind of stuff to me, where it's like not political, it's apolitical, it doesn't have a figurehead to like, you know, straw man or Iron Man, like, you know, there's it's just people coming together because they need this thing done. Like
I don't pretend that I am an expert at this. I'm not. I feel like there can be instances where there is like a figurehead, you know, maybe the face of the movement, but I also feel like there has to be several moving parts. Like there has to be like other figureheads, and I think this is what you were saying, Reef, like there has to be people behind the scenes who are delegated with doing certain things. So
Yes.
like not every one person can do it all. Like it could be that that person is more of the marketing, you know, in terms of like
Right.
what the organization is. And then
And
there are
even
other
then,
people.
I want like
Right.
backups on that. Like, you know,
Right.
to me, it's just I'm looking at the field the way it's played now. Even if a movement is good, it's too easy to like shut it down because you go for the head of the totem pole, and
Right.
like then there's no energy or like, you know, yeah, it takes a leader to like gather a group of people, but as Ture said, that's not organizing. That's what did he call
Well, it's
MLK?
mobilizing.
It was
Well,
mobilizing.
he said mobilizing. So
Right.
it's mobilizing is the idea of like you get people together after like around an issue. So
Yes.
like
or
George
specific
Floyd,
actions, right?
like
You
George
know.
Floyd, I think it's a perfect example of that. You
I
know,
also think
like
mutual aid organizations and charity in and of itself is what he's talking about. You
Yeah.
know, like
Right.
it's putting things in place that not only can that be used to pressure, those same organizations can be used to do that, right? They can also directly help through mutual aid, you know, through whatever. What for the folks at home who don't know, who is Kwame Ture? You know, I don't think we
Kwame
talked about
Ture-
that much.
Kwame Ture, also known as Stokely Carmichael, is revolutionary. He formerly from Trinidad. He organized at Howard. So you could say, I wouldn't say he was a contemporary to John Lewis, but they kind of, you know, within that same time frame. But he was essentially like you would say the originator of the Black Power movement. So to
Okay.
speak.
It reminds
So,
me of like Alec Baldwin.
yeah. James Baldwin.
James Baldwin.
Yeah,
Sorry,
so like
wrong guy.
yeah, definitely like definitely in that
Not out.
legion of, you know, radicals and revolutionaries in the 60s for sure. You know, so in particular.
Yeah.
But I thought about this earlier, but like I was having a conversation with you know, like with a person I know on Twitter a few weeks ago, and I think just like I was arguing in certain instances I'm more left than he is on many
Right.
issues. And then he asked, I didn't answer him at the time, but like we ended the conversation. It actually was in regards to the RA bill. And last tweet he sent was basically among the means of should we accept a half a loaf from Democrats? You know, I forgot like what he said, but it's the idea of like, should we be satisfied with Democrats giving us half a loaf, essentially?
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't answer him at the time, but in my mind, I'm like, I don't want to give people. The idea shouldn't be giving people half a loaf or even a crumb. The idea should be giving people the damn bakery.
Yeah.
You know, like
You mean
even if
seems
it's
the means of production? You
yeah,
fucking
right.
By saying what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like, fulfill your campaign promises. God fucking damn. It's not hard.
It's not
Well, see,
hard, but I think
that's the thing is that
that's what a half a loaf is. Like if a person's promising you a bakery, but then you only get a half a loaf, you're gonna get way more pissed off than as opposed to someone who's saying, "Okay, you're only gonna get half a loaf."
But you know what? I'm not so sure of that, because I think if a person who is really serious about it, who fought tooth and nail, like to get the bakery, and then if we end up getting, like, let's say as a father, like you want your children to eat, you know, like I'm going to use the bread again. You promise them, you know, a whole loaf of bread, you know, and you go out and work or whatever else and fight or whatever else, but just due to life or whatever, just due to capitalism, whatever, you end up with half a loaf. I would argue in that instance, if that is the best that you can do, given the situation that that person is fighting against. But my issue with Democrats generally is that they start with half a loaf, not even go to the top thing. Like they don't even shoot for the best thing. They start from the compromise position and then work their way down from there. And so what we end up with is the crumbs, essentially, or even that, to the degree. So for me, it's like, I'd imagine like I remember people having this with Bernie, like the idea of him fighting Medicare for all, like people were saying, like it may not happen, but he will fight to the mat for it. Now, knowing what he's doing now, that's questionable if he would have done that. But that was what people were saying, back a couple of years ago, that at least imagine that possibility.
He used
I'm having trouble logically following this analogy here because, to quote the great Spider-Man's grandpa, with great power comes great responsibility.
To compare Spider-Man's grandpa? You mean Uncle Ben?
Uncle Ben.
Uncle Ben.
Yeah. Sorry.
The rice mogul.
It's,
like
okay. The massive power, and when you're a government, you're basically like the host of a party. When you're a poor family just trying to take care of your kids, you're not necessarily bogged down by your own. But what is within your own power,
right? And that's the thing. And
you are actually
to bring it back to
downplay what you're capable of is something that's like on a whole different level of disingenuous. In my opinion.
Reef, I think you're gonna say maybe what I'm gonna say.
I think with Kwame, and this is gonna be real revolutionary thinking that I'm gonna spit out for people. It's what power you actually have. Like,
right.
It's what you can use to organize. Keep in mind, you already have the means of production. You are the producers. Like, individually, you make something that someone else wants. Like, you go to the farmer and you ask for wheat. Like, especially those Dutch ones who, are unhappy right now. They would like to still feed you. They need their tractors repaired. They need to be able to keep running. They can do everything you need to if you can just keep them running. And keeping our brothers and sisters afloat is the best organization right now. Mm-hmm. Look at what Rome's doing by giving people actual goods they can use.
Right.
Like, that is the thing. Stop worrying about electoral problems and worry about what you can worry about. Because obviously they're not listening anymore. Right. But you build enough of a structure that people listen to you instead because you give them what you need, what they need. Like, what do they have? Ignore the government at this point. Right. Do it your damn self. Yeah.
It's all about following through on your principles. Like when you have people like the Black Panthers and MLK who have certain values and they hold it to them, like not to their personality, but their person,
right?
Like their soul. You tend to trust these people, and you can actually change minds like that too.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
Like we did a rant a couple of months ago with Jamal Bowman, and like I played a clip of when he spoke at my event. He said, engage Congress because Congress has the power to do whatever they want. So it's the idea for me of like, I want to take power from those motherfuckers.
Yeah.
Because they have essentially the best shit and they're not giving it to us. So
the problem with organizing, especially with online stuff, is it's hard to trust people when you can't interact with them face to face daily.
Right. I love this. By the way, I really like. Courtney's great. I really think that like the CIA has just done a really good job. Like they really did a lot of learning over the years, especially after the civil rights movement in World War II. They really know what they're doing now, which is part of the problem. Because every single watch how every single movement, especially now within the past decade, is co-opted and bastardized to death. That this happened with George Floyd. I would even argue it happened with Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah.
They pacify you, they celebritize you, they make everyone divided to the point where it's basically dead. It's the whole purpose of them is to halt movements. That's why, I mean, really, it's centered about a big enemy rather than like what we're doing with each other. Who gives a fuck about what you think about the inflation or Medicare? When you have certain opinions, like if you, I think a lot of people can agree on unionizing worker-owned capital.
Yep.
We can talk about that, and we can get something moving on that.
Right.
We're so focused on these like little
Wouldn't you-
minuscule things about COVID or Ukraine or
Wouldn't
anything.
you rather have
anything else.
union drip? Wouldn't you rather have drip?
That's rich, y'all.
Like,
Just, I'm gonna
like
get a tattoo.
especially if you just got fired from Amazon, you would really love union drip. You know.
Tattoos.
So shout out to friend to the show, Courtney, who
Courtney's
tweeted
great.
us
Shout
out.
out to Data is coming out.
Yeah.
soon.
You got
Yeah,
next
yeah.
week.
For them as well.
all you
So-
kids over there gotta keep Jesus in between you. You gotta leave space for Jesus.
Follow Info Change
know?
Camp.
Yeah. So she says it would make sense if the left is all ops fighting with each other online. Y'all exhausting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every movement I've seen, the key factor is just to exhaust the people organizing. You know?
Nick
So-
also a friend of the show, who replied back, people still have no idea what to do with their energy post Bernie.
They have no clue.
We're lost. We're so
Yeah.
lost.
That's why I say you can't have a figurehead, because the minute the figurehead's gone, like, all that energy was wasted.
See, I disagree. I
Yeah.
disagree.
I think
That's where principles come in.
Right.
It's
Mhm.
principles over people. That's
Mhm.
always the case. I think the leaderhead is just there to communicate those principles. That's
Right.
why you need someone who's genuine, not someone who's going to be bastardized by the U.S. government.
Right.
Right.
Well, the issue is that the entire left has trust issues because they got
Right.
left at the altar.
right.
Like, you know, and nothing was fought. You knew there was something up. Nothing was fought for you. Like, you know, you knew the election was stolen and rigged, and you got it went right back into the faces of, like, you got Trump because of it. You got, like, we're here now. You know, where it's like, it's so many of us have to be disillusioned. It's like you have to go, everyone has to go through the stages of grief. Like, they had to go through
I don't think
denial
people-
and, like,
I don't think people
You know.
truly understand the urgency of this moment right now. Like,
They don't
we are
get it.
literally we're on the brink of climate disaster. Wealth inequality is the highest it's ever been.
yeah,
We're really, like, as Misty says, we're fucked.
we're fucked. You
But,
know?
like, people are too comfortable. People just don't give a shit enough in order to actually do something about it.
We're
And that's a lot of this energy is spent really just shitting on each other's opinions about little shit that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember
Twitter's a-
Lucy here. Some of the people that call themselves revolutionaries are hipsters unless they are clear on what they mean by revolution. Meanwhile, you try to support more nonviolent organization and get flamed for not being disruptive enough. Like, just admit y'all want to stay home. You know?
Yeah.
Like, so, yeah, I mean,
And Indy responded, you know, I'm just over here like Amazon and Starbucks are retaliating and firing union organizers, and Julian Assange is about to be extradited and put on trial for exposing the war crimes of the most powerful people in the world. You know,
Yep.
basically he's saying that is because this shit is happening and yet we're focusing on the drama.
Yeah, and we're right now trying to beg people to show up to hold hands around the DOJ so that we can like free Assange. Like basic stuff. Like
let's be honest, people love the drama. They eat that shit up because it's like entertainment.
Yeah.
Basically like the new television is just like
and you know what they need to do? You know what they need to do?
I'm Michael Jordan. Stop it. Get some help.
That's all you need. You just need help. Like but
I like we need to get the fucking on we need to focus on the right issues.
But you know what? I think the way that we do that, because I think especially in media, in independent media, like Kwame talked about organizing essentially to take power away from, you know, the higher ups essentially.
Yeah.
We also need to do that in independent media as well, because, you know, there are people like who are principled in capitalism that are trying to steer the narrative around talking about issues that, as you guys are saying, really mean nothing at the end of the day, when there are a lot more deeper issues, like case in point. And again, I don't want to call out our community necessarily. I think this is just kind of a ongoing thing, but Indy kind of mentioned this to me a couple of days ago. My rants last week on Brianna Joy Gray and Jenk, I think within the first 48 hours, got like maybe like 50 views or something like that. Indian Reef talked about Amazon workers. There was a clip that was put out, you know, a couple of weeks ago. And that clip was put out for like maybe about a week, right? And got about 50 views.
Right.
So, you know, so it's the idea of like, what are we focusing on? Are we focusing on the drama, or are we focusing on actually doing revolutionary shit? And yeah, to be real, doing revolutionary shit is hard as fuck, but it does take a lot of trust, and we don't trust anybody in the space, you know, like necessarily, you know, we kind of discount people if we hold opinions that might be counter to like what is considered purist left, which I talked about last week, and that shit really like fucks me to no end, you know? But a lot of that is just due to the fact that a lot of the bigger channels are controlling the narrative. And I think that's where I think, especially with us, you know, and others who are really serious, who are a lot smaller, I think the idea is like, we need to control that narrative in the right way, you know, and kind of take power and take away the steam out of these bigger channels. Because right now, they're coalescing around each other, you know, and like, we're trying to compete against that.